The Cosmic Portal welcomes you. And please, subscribe for more.
There is a relentless force in the cosmos. Time and space connect. And within it, a force beyond our vision, but not our reach. It lies somewhere in our universe, causing ripples in time, where the here and now is infinite.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the path to a galaxy far, far away. I am your host. I am the headmaster of the Fraternal Order of the Force, where the Jedi and the Sith kind of sort of coexist, share their powers, their training, and everything. In the last several weeks, we have been going over different Star Wars movies. Each of us has had a certain movie and talked about it and everything. Gentlemen, ladies, everybody that's watching, I can tell you this. This movie here kickstarted my career, you might say, in Star Wars. And you know what? Let's just stop right now. Guys, I've talked enough. I have a special guest for you guys tonight. He is the very first Star Wars character I have ever met. And I didn't know who he was when he kind of sort of reached out to me the very first time and got his autograph. And then just recently I met him again and we had an opportunity to talk and everything. So guys, with no further ado, let me introduce to you Mr. John Dak Morton.
Hey, babe. How are you? May the force be with you.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. I'm walking.
So I guess everybody wants to know, who did you play in The Empire Strikes Back?
Well, I was the actor of record playing Dak, Mark Hamill's co-pilot, backseater. And because we were delayed for a whole host of reasons, I was only supposed to spend 2 days on the job. I ended up working 4 weeks. And there was a lot of standing around in that time because the schedule was shifting and all. And it so happened that Jeremy Bulloch was hired to do another film for 2 days. And since I had worked with the first, second, and third assistants in previous films like A Bridge Too Far and Superman 2, they knew I was a team player. And so what they did was offered me to stand in for Jeremy in the scene in Bespin where Boba Fett says he's no good to me dead. And so I worked on that for 2 days. And it was gas. I hadn't realized how significant it was until many, many years later when I discovered that Boba Fett was the fourth most popular character in Star Wars, or at least from the original trilogy. So yeah, I played Dak Rowter and Boba Fett.
So we at the convention one time, we talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to share with these guys. So I just recently watched this evening The Empire Strikes Back, and your character seemed to be very, very kind of like letting Luke know, hey, I don't have an approached vector. You know, I'm not set. You know, you're letting that boy know what's going on. It seemed like to me Luke was being ignorant, you might say. And then he leaves you to die, and he's supposed to be our hero. What is your take on that?
Well, you know, the INCOM combat system in that snowspeeder was less than adequate. The backstory on Dak in the extended universe is that he was a very experienced starfighter. He flew with the Yellow Aces, and in the Nintendo games, he was pretty much of an ace. So I mean, yeah, Dak certainly didn't have the Force. He wasn't Force sensitive, but he was an accomplished starfighter, and Luke was learning his chops, and if he didn't get what Dak was trying to tell him, well, we had a problem there. But it's the fog of war. We did all right. In the conventions, I always used to ask people, because when I first started doing conventions in the 90s, they were saying, "Hey, John, do you think Luke was going back to save you, or was he going back to get his lightsaber?" I'd always turn it around and I'd say, "Well, what do you all think? Everybody raise your hand if you think they were going to go, he's going back to get Dak." Well, I'd get one of two, maybe. And then, well, what about, is he going back to get his lightsaber? So the fans think that he was just going back to get the lightsaber. What I would say is, in Star Wars Legends, there was another character that was on Hoth in the extended universe named Dash Rendar. And Dash Rendar had some SAR teams running around Hoth after the battle. And he came upon with his SAR team, Dak, in the crushed snowspeeder. And it was crushed to the extent that it was put into the snow and ice. But Dak was still alive. And so Dash Rendar pulled him out with his team, and they had an emergency Bacta tank, a little small thing. I've got a picture of it. And they restored Dak, smuggled him off in his spaceship, and Dak was sort of put back together, but not sufficiently that he could be a fighter jock. So in my reckoning, he went off into the outer rims and he ran a tap calf, which is my Twitter handle. Kind of like Humphrey Bogart, Rick in Casablanca. So I had this tap calf out there, and I was working with the rebels, and but Dak was always very interested in music, so I had some good musicians coming in and playing stuff. So yeah, it was a hot place.
So I surely wanted to give my fellow Jedi and Sith a chance to ask you some questions. So I had one more question for you, and I'd like to turn it over to them. Like I said, The Empire Strikes Back was a pivotal moment for me. I didn't get into all these conventions and everything. Never thought I would. And and I remember coming Christmas morning, coming down in the living room, and I had one side of nothing but Star Wars, and it was all The Empire Strikes Back, from the Hoth playset to the Millennium Falcon. It was a sight that I still remember today. So my question for you is, and like I said, I'd like to turn it over to some of the other guys and let them have some questions for you. So how was it? How was it like to work with George Lucas? Was he down to earth? Was he, a good man to deal with? He seems to be that way. Please, I would love to know.
Well, back in 1979, when I worked with him, he was a shy fella. I mean, his background professionally was editor, so it wasn't like he was, a person who had an extroverted personality. So when he was directing me in the scenes in Hoth, he was directing me as an editor. He wasn't really concerned about emoting lines or what have you. He was more concerned about what I was looking at as I was saying the line. So he'd say, "Okay, John, whatever the line was, say it looking up at that light. Okay, that's great. All right, everybody keep rolling it. All right, say the line. All right, now John, look down a little bit over to your left. Now, yeah, perfect. Say the line again." So the film was rolling. I was mic'd, as was Mark Hamill. So they were capturing our voices for the dubbing, but obviously they weren't going to be using the the sound that they were capturing there for dubbing purposes. So as I'm saying, Lucas was more concerned about the editing aspects of how he was going to lace the film together with what was on the blue screen, because all of our action work was done against the blue screen. He didn't know what the animation or anything else was going to be like. So he was covering his bases as an accomplished editor, so that when he got into the editing studio, he had a range of things that he could choose from. From me and everybody else were in the cockpits, either as the backseaters or the pilots. And as far as the magic of filmmaking goes, it didn't really matter for us, under 5-line characters, such as what I was playing, whether you were using my voice or a voice actor, because nobody knew what John Morton sounded like. They certainly know about Mark Hamill. So all of that post-production dubbing, looping work was done in Los Angeles. So I don't know who actually voiced Dak. In the case of Superman 2, another film I was in, it so happened that they did the looping at Twickenham Studios in London. And my agent got a call to see if I was available to dub my own scenes. And I was. And so I went down. And so you're hearing my voice, John Morton, as astronaut Nate in Superman 2. But I tell you, in all honesty, if I hadn't been available that day, doing another job or what have you, they would have moved on and said, okay, well, we were just, doing a courtesy for John, so he could loop his own voice, but we'll find somebody. Elsewhere with George, he was a true believer in his vision, and he had a certain amount of impatience for any of us that were lackadaisical regarding our work in Star Wars as just a job. And so I remember, he didn't really tolerate people, horsing around and, with an attitude like, this is just a job, man. I don't remember this, but a dear friend of mine, Eugene Lipinski, who was on the production for a few days until he got cast in another role. He was one of the Rebel pilots, and Eugene and I have remained friends to this day. He remembers a time when he really exploded at a bunch of guys who was saying, you're making light of all this and you're being difficult. Someday you're going to realize, what a privilege it was to work on this. On another sense, I have to say, I was on the set for 4 weeks. And so I was pretty much, that was a long time. Normally, with small roles, you're there for, 2 or 3 days, something like that, unless you're doing location work in a big film, which I did with Bridge Too Far and some others overseas, Cuba with Sean Connery. The morale on that film was extraordinary. It was a big production, a lot of people, but as a tribute to George and to Gary Kurtz, who was one of the executive producers, who I also worked with on the Hoth scenes, they really generated a morale that was felt all the way down to the tea lady who was working the tea trolley. The morale was extremely high, and there was a great deal of loyalty to George and Gary and the production. So I'm very seriously say the force was present and still is in the Star Wars community.
That's awesome.
It really was an exceptional experience. And this was, a time when the people who came into that film with Empire Strikes Back and probably Return of the Jedi, at least in England, where all this was done in the studio work, weren't of the mind where the people are now, like Vanessa Marshall, who I know pretty well, who played Hera in Rebels. They were coming into the films when they got cast with great excitement because they were fans already. We didn't have that in 1979. So it was sort of an amazing experience to the extent is that, you became a true believer as a result of doing the films rather than before you went into it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Well, I tell you what, man, you gave me goosebumps. So I'd like to introduce you to basically our show producer. He runs the Cosmic Portal and quite a bit of different shows, and I'm sure he's a big fan of your Boba Fett costume.
Okay.
Mr. Calibus Rand.
All right, man.
Hey, what was that? I mean, obviously you didn't know how much of a big deal it would be to wear the iconic, armor that now spawns a TV series and now is getting ready to be made into a movie. But I mean, what was it like in that suit? I mean, you know what I mean? Just being there. You said you worked on it for 2 days, that scene.
Yeah.
How was that?
I did some work with Billy D. Williams in the freezing chamber. And so I was with Billy D. the second day, the two of us setting things up. The armor was very special, although I have to say I didn't really fully understand or appreciate its significance. But I think I ought to tell you about Jeremy Bullock. He's the Boba Fett of record, and the night before I was to take over for him for 2 days, I went into his dressing room as he was checking out, and I said, "Hey, man, how am I going to play this guy? I don't know anything about him." And I just knew his costume or his armor was sort of like stormtroopers. There was no face and what have you. He had a helmet and bucket. And Jeremy said, "Oh, well, okay. Think Clint Eastwood. A fistful of dollars. Play everything slow and menacing." And that's kind of how I inhabited the armor. I remember thinking of my bucket with the receiver that was there, that connected him to Slave One, as kind of a man-machine interface. I had a military background, so I sort of saw myself as kind of bionic in that sense. And it made me feel an equal, if you will, to Darth Vader. So when he came in, I just sort of tracked him like a radar, a fire control mechanism. And if he'd done something that I didn't like, I was going to take him out. And with Jeremy's, suggestions on how to play it, do everything slow and menacing, that's what I did. And the body language that I used was body language of somebody who wasn't intimidated, although Darth Vader was 6'7" and I was 5'10". And so I played it with the chin going forward, which in the example of the bucket, as you know, with Boba Fett, you have that sharp angle. And I just thrust that chin out again, even though I was looking up at him, and it was kind of like, I was in his face. And so, when he goes on down the corridor towards the elevator at the end of that sequence, I just sort of follow him in a sort of methodical way, slow and menacing, not skipping after him. I was just, you know, a 5'10" individual going don don da 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 da. So that worked, and I give you know, Jeremy you know, the credit for doing that. I don't know. I mean, Lucas, or neither Lucas nor Irving Kershner. Actually, Irving Kershner directed all of those scenes that I was in as Boba. Gave me any direction on how to play it. It was just marking your first position and what you were doing. Lucas wasn't there, so it was all Irving Kershner. I, you know, I don't know if Boba Fett was written or conceived as a Clint Eastwood character. You all might be better able to say that, having perhaps read more Star Wars things than I have. You know, the making of Empire Strikes Back. But I give Jeremy all the credit, at least for what I was doing. And many times I heard Jeremy, as we shared panel discussions, say that he felt the armor, which, you know, Calabas Ran gets to your point, the armor was really the thing that made Boba Fett. What happens when you get dressed up for the first time in a costume is the wardrobe master or mistress puts you into it. And then during a break in shooting, you get walked out to the soundstage to show your outfit to the director and you know, and get a sign off. And Jeremy always would maintain that when he suited up the first time and went out to see Lucas and walked onto the soundstage, the electricians and the prop masters and all the rest of it were all doing their business. And suddenly they saw him and everything stopped. And it was one of those things where in Jeremy's mind, the character of Boba Fett was compelling just by virtue of Joe Johnston's, you know, armor. It shut down all the activity of these guys, you know, adjusting lights and, you know, tuning up widgets and getting the cameras and all that. It's kind of like, as soon as Jeremy showed up, it's like, whoa, man, what in the world is that? Who is that guy?
That
I got, wait a minute, I got one more. When are you coming back to, look, when are you coming back to this area? I know you were at Tidewater Comic-Con. When are you coming back to the Virginia area anytime soon to sign autographs and stuff?
I think Mike Federale has got me coming back to Tidewater this spring or summer, whenever it is. I think I'm on board.
Okay, because I'll be bringing my bucket.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work with Mike these days, and he's a great promoter, and I think he's got me lined up to do something at Shenandoah University out in the, you know, Shenandoah Valley. That'll be in I think that's in April. But yeah, the best way to track me is the Boba Fett fan club.
okay.
Aaron Proctor puts for all of us. Aaron Proctor puts our schedules in, and I make a point of noting for Aaron when I get something confirmed. So you can follow Daniel, Mark Austin, Dickie Beer, Don Bias, myself. So the Boba Fett fan club is a good place to go to find out where I'm at.
Well, me and Calabas will be in line again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got to get that bucket signed.
There you go.
Well, Dak, I got another one for you. We met this nice guy and his wife at a panel called Lucas versus Roddenberry, and then this couple came out, started talking to us, and he and his wife has been following me and a good friend of mine for a while now. He's a huge Star Wars fan, and Master Shadow, please talk to Dak.
There you go, babe. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm fine. Thanks so much for joining us, because
Sure.
I'm a huge fan. You know, you've answered a few of my questions, because I was going to ask, when you said when Luke was in the when the ship was destroyed and Luke reached back and you see him get his lightsaber, was he just going to leave you there in the back of the ship and let you be crushed by the AT-AT? And I was like, that's what he did, He got his lightsaber and he walked right out, left you right there. But my actual question, filming this in 1979, I know Lucas didn't feel that the original Star Wars was going to be a huge success. It turned out to be major.
Oh,
And
I
then,
don't. I don't think so. I think George was always convinced
Well,
this
you
thing
think
was
so?
going to go. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask.
He if he had issues, and there certainly were issues, which was part of the reason why I ended up working there for 4 weeks instead of 2 days. They were issues with the studio, 20th Century. He had a supporter there, as you all probably know, Alan Ladd Jr. But he was cranking out a lot of money and having to go back to Laddie and say, "Hey, I can you get me another million here or another million there?" And there was a lot of back and forth. And so, yeah, he could have come a cropper, because he was blowing the budgets. And if you remember, in these big budget films in the late 1970s, Michael Cimino, for example, with Heaven's Gate, the directors were sort of abusing their auteur status and just not following budgets at all. And it all came crashing down after Heaven's Gate. And that period of time was over, and the studios got a little bit tighter on the way people were spending money. So I think in that respect, he was under a lot of pressure with Empire Strikes Back because he was going so far over budget. The only thing he had leverage on was just the success of Star Wars, which he didn't have in the first film, A New Hope. So that was a little different. But I honestly, I don't think I think he knew what he had. I don't think there was any doubt. And certainly I had lunch with Mark Hamill virtually every day because we were on the same schedule. And Mark told me many times that, hey, it's going to be 9 films. It's going to be around for, a lifetime. Perhaps he didn't think it would, it would have taken so long to get 9, films. So that, the last one of that series was when did the last episode 9 come out? But I mean, no, I think I don't think Lucas had any doubt. I don't know what the books say. You could prove me wrong, but I think he was convinced, whatever other people thought, that he had a great vision and he was going to realize it.
Okay. All right. So, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you for answering that, because I always wondered, at that time, like when you auditioned for your role, was it like hush hush like it is now when it's going to Star Wars, what you're auditioning for?
No. No. The scene in London for the North American actors, the Canadians and the Yanks, was pretty. I mean, we were all interlocked, and we read the trades. There was a trade magazine that came out every month that was my Bible, called Screen International. And so we knew when the casting sessions were up and what was coming down. So, I was always going to my agent saying, "Hey, are you on top of this? I'd like to audition." And she'd say, "Yeah. That's what you're giving me my 10% for." So when I was approached through my agent by the casting director, who was named Irene Lamb, to come in for an interview with her, I knew it was for Star Wars, or the second Star Wars. And when I went in to see her, we had a chit chat. There wasn't any question of reading sides or anything like that. It was, you got to remember, it was those particular roles where there wasn't much dialogue. So I mean, the casting directors sort of understood, at least in London, when they were casting the level of characters that I was competing for. I had acted in the West End, in a West End musical, done a fair amount of shows on stage. And by the time I did Star Wars, I'd already been in 4 or 5 films. So they knew you could do the job. It's just, did you look right for, what the casting director was interpreting from the instructions from the studio and from, the production office. And so with that interview, she said, okay, that's great. You'll hear from us, which is not a guarantee that you got the job, but it was a good sign. And about a week or so later, I got a call from my agent saying that she had heard from Irini, and I'd been cast as a rebel pilot. And show up at Elstree on Monday or whatever.
So, my better half, the one that helped get us all together and everything, she wanted to ask you about Superman, I think.
Okay.
So my big huge crush was Christopher Reeve.
Wonderful guy.
So I was so sad when he passed away.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about your part in that movie, and what was it like?
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting film to work on. I will say that if I hadn't been able to go and dub my own voice for Superman 2 for my dialogue, I would never have met Christopher Reeve. When I showed up at the studio, Twickenham, Christopher Reeve in the middle of it came in because he was the next up to do some dubbing for his things. And he was just a wonderful man. What you see was what you got. And some of the great actors that I've met always do the same thing. Christopher Reeve came up to me and he said, "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Christopher Reeve." Okay. It was just like that. It was, not making any assumptions like, I'm coming in and I know that you know who I am. And so kiss the ring. It was, hey, I'm Christopher Reeve. Just a really good guy. Really good guy. And I don't remember what we chatted about, but it was just like you and me talking right now.
I'll be sure.
I have one more question, if you don't mind, guys. So
Yeah.
I read that you were in Flash Gordon. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. What was your part in that?
I was the airline pilot that picks up Flash Gordon and Melody Anderson after the Super Bowl game. And
that was one of my favorite movies. I
Yeah,
didn't know you were in that.
I read his bio.
I crashed.
See, you got to do your research.
Yeah, I crashed the plane into Billy Hootkin's laboratory at the very beginning of the film.
That's great.
Yeah. It was
So
fun.
this next gentleman, I know I met him through the conventions and everything. He's a great prop builder. He kind of runs his own squadron on Star Wars Squadrons. Mr. Rob Ash from Virginia Imperial, please, sir. Mr. Dak is yours.
Very nice to meet you. Always been a big fan. I remember you in Flash Gordon. But I got one question. Did any memorabilia or mementos or props make its way home with you?
No, I was too stupid and too honest to do that. So, yeah, no.
Is there anything that you wished you had took home with you?
Well, I think as I was looking at my gloves that were these beautiful gray leather gloves with, knobs on the top, which I guess you talked into like a Dick Tracy watch. I remember thinking to myself, maybe I can walk off with these, but a little man on my shoulder said, no, I don't want to do that. But that was the only thing that I could conceive of trying to walk off with. But I was a goody two shoes. I behaved myself.
That's
This
good.
this next gentleman is probably one of the most knowledgeable Star Wars fans I think I've ever met. I've seen pictures of his book collection of everything. He is the historian of the Fraternal Order of the Force, and I believe the Priory of the Phoenix. Mr. Sai, please introduce yourself to Dak.
Hello, Dak. My name is Simon. You can call me Sai.
Hey, bud. How you doing, Si? You're the
Doing
holocron, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am. I Empire Strikes Back is my favorite all-time movie. It always has been ever since I was little. Did you go? What was your favorite place to do any of the shooting? Did you go to Norway when they did
No,
Nope.
no. I was no, a Norwegian extra actually took the shot in the crash. I don't know his name. I was told at one point, and I was trying to encourage him to come out on the convention circuit because I'm sure people would like to.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't had any luck in getting them out there. So all of the work that I did on Star Wars was done at Elstree, primarily in the big sound stage that they had erected there. And then the other close-up scenes of all of us, when we were in the cockpit of the snow speeders, were done in a little sound stage that was off to one side in an adjacent building. So there were two locations, two different buildings. The big sound stage that they had where the Millennium Falcon was.
Oh yeah.
And then the little thing where the inserts were. But I did, I also did The Shining, and that was going on at the same time there at Elstree, in the back lot, in and around when I was doing Star Wars. And then the scene that I was in, actually, I love telling people this. It was ICI, Imperial Chemical Industries, dendritic salt that was spread all over the place in the big soundstage where the Millennium Falcon was. And, Lucasfilm swept all that stuff off and up and sold it to Stanley Kubrick, who used it for The Shining. And in
Really?
fact, the scene that I was involved in, which was an exterior shot on the Colorado interstate during the blizzard, where Scatman Crothers comes upon this jackknifed tractor trailer over a VW and can't get by. That was shot on a little airstrip just north of the Elstree studios. And all the snow that was on Hoth was spread out on this tarmac.
Oh, okay.
So Hoth snow was used in The Shining.
It's kind of creepy, but cool.
Yeah.
If there was one other franchise that you could reappear in, out of all the movies you've done, and I know this is Star Wars show, but you personally, what would you like to reappear in, even now today?
Well, that was the only. Well, they only did one Flash Gordon, so I mean that was the only franchise series that I was in. So that sort of answers the question.
Yep. Okay.
If there was one film that I'd love to do over again, it was A Bridge Too Far. That was an amazing experience, and that was done all on location in the Netherlands, and that was. I mean, I could write a book on that. In fact, some guy has done that, and I contributed some reminiscences for him.
Well, thank you.
Great film to be a part of that one.
Well, Dak, last but not least, he is our Sith Lord of the group. He brings a lot of comedy. He really gets under my skin sometimes. It makes me want to grab my lightsaber from time to time. And he probably wants to go to another room after talking to me, since I heard that earlier. Mr. Mr. Sith Lord, please, the floor is yours, sir.
Dak, hey, appreciate your time and coming on this thing they call a podcast. I don't know what.
Okay. And you're Dex. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, buddy. I want to touch on just real quick the comments you made on Christopher Reeve. That really just that touched my heart because he really seemed to be a really special guy, and just you reiterating that, just kind of that touched me. So
yeah. No, he was a sweetheart. You know, he was a good guy. And completely, I mean, you know, this was when I met him was the probably it was the summer of '79, and I'm trying to remember when the first film came out. So I mean, he was a huge star as a result of that. But he was completely unfazed.
Mm.
You know, it didn't affect him one way or the other. He was a real dude.
That's awesome to hear. So a question that I have, actually, it's kind of two questions. Not sure, were you probably at the time weren't aware of this. Well, I guess you did. You knew it was going to be 9 movies, that this was going to be a lifetime thing. But did you realize really how big this was really going to be?
No.
And the legacy of it. Okay.
No, and I missed it completely. Honestly, you know, what happened was I left the film business when I came back to America, and I got involved in that's a long story. You know, I had a film that was in development in LA, which brought me back, and that came crashing down during the writers and directors strike in 1981. So I instead of going back to London, I stupidly went to New York and started doing sort of stage work there, and hopefully getting back into film and what have you. Didn't happen. So after I did 2 plays, one that I wrote, one was produced in New York off Broadway, didn't go anywhere, and so I finally left and came back down to Washington and started up. I had another play that ran in DC in '88, but I started making my living as a reporter for defense publications, and it was in 1997 when the re-releases were coming, and I remember going, with my girlfriend to see The English Patient, and they had the trailers for Star Wars, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to." I was a single parent at the time. I had my 2 daughters. I said, "Hey, I think I'd like to take my daughters to see this film," and she said she was pretty connected to the Baltimore scene, and so she managed to get a hold of the owners or the managers of the Senator Theater in Towson, and asked if she could get tickets for her friend who wanted to take his daughter on her 6th birthday and her sister to see the movie. And the guy laughed at her and said, "You kidding? There's not a seat in the house." And she said, "Well, what about if I tell you that he was in the film?" And that changed everything. And so I got to take my daughters to see the film. And it was at that time when, they got the local media around. I was the only Star Wars guy that was around in the Baltimore, Washington area. So all the TV stations, did interviews with me. I had interviews for print journalism that went through UPI or AP, whatever. Nationwide, I got calls from people in Charleston, South Carolina. Hey, John, you're in the paper here. And then I started getting calls from conventions saying, hey, we all thought you were dead. People want you to come to conventions. They want your autograph. So I had no idea that all this was going on. Then I learned that, Tim Zahn had been writing, Star Wars novels. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, I missed it completely. Now, mind you, I have to be honest. I never really was a science fiction fan. That really wasn't my thing. So it wasn't a world that I really interacted with. But once I got roped in '97 after the re-releases and started doing the convention circuit, that is when I kind of came into your worlds and quickly ramped up with my knowledge on, the extended universe. And I went up to West End Games, and when Lucasfilm found out that I was a writer, a military writer, we went back and forth about me possibly doing something like Mike Stackpole with his X-Wing series. So, yeah, I mean, I was a quick study. I learned.
I gotta say, Dak, my wife, she got a little emotional. She had to leave. She had to go pick up my son from work.
Okay.
But to jump on Dexter's coattails about Christopher Reeve, she loves Christopher Reeve. She thoroughly enjoyed those kind words that you had to say about him, and I'm sure Dexter did too. But she just wanted to say thank you because she couldn't stay. She had to go get my son. But
if I am doing Tidewater, I'll see you all down there.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot I didn't go into on Superman 2, which is kind of interesting. I will say very quickly. These were the guys that were the first, second, and third assistants on Superman 2 were the same that were on Star Wars and A Bridge Too Far. So I knew these guys pretty well. And one of them said, hey, John, come take a look at through the camera of what we're looking at in your scene when he was setting up the establishing shots. And the soundstage was the moon, right? And darn if it didn't look like you were on the moon, man. It was amazing. So that experience of from the perspective of the camera, where the lunar module was, where I was, and the astronauts in the distance, who were, by the way, kids, 8-9-year-old kids who were, so it made, when they were doing what they were doing, it was made to look like, oh gosh, they're 100 yards away when really they were only 10, perspective distortion. It was extraordinary.
That's awesome.
It really, I felt, that was really neat.
But Mr. Dak,
I have one more comment.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I want to know, since you were in Superman 2, would you ever want to do another Superman movie?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing again, being an astronaut, or something completely different?
If I had the chance to be in a film again, I'd take it in a heartbeat. I'm still a union man, pay my dues, but I don't know that anybody would want me. My chops are a bit rusty.
Well, Dak, it has been a thoroughly awesome. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dexter.
I had one more thing. I didn't realize that this man was Boba Fett either, which is freaking amazing. Right? But my comment on that is, you may have been tracking him, but there's no way you're taking him out. I'm just saying, Vader would have kicked Boba Fett's butt. But yeah.
Well, we couldn't go the force without having the Sith say something like that. But anyways, that's why we have him here. Dak, I hope that you've had a great time with us. I know I did. I could tell that my fellow Sith and Jedi have done the same thing. I know my wife; she was ecstatic to hear from you as well. I look forward to seeing you back around our area again, and I'm sure anytime that you want to promote yourself, talk to that man, Mr. Calibus Rand. He would be honored to probably do it because.
Where are you all based? Because you're not all down there in Tidewater, are you? You're
Well, I'm Portsmouth, Virginia.
okay. Master Shadow, where are you?
I'm in Hampton, Virginia. Still same 7 cities, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Norfolk, Virginia.
You're where?
I'm in Norfolk.
Norfolk. Okay, so you're all down there at the mouth of the James.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the only person that's not here is Cy.
Yeah, I'm in Tampa, Florida, sir.
Okay.
Yep, we're all around in the same cities in the same area. I'm in Chesapeake.
And our good friend Eric, he is from out Midwest, and he's a huge Bounty Hunter fan.
He's a big Boba Fett fan. Yeah, he's in Missouri.
Yes, sir. But
that's with respect to Boba Fett, I'm very careful to say that I'm Bespin Boba because the real Boba Fett is Jeremy Bulloch. So I call myself Bespin Boba for that reason. And I
you're not the one that got thrown in the Starlight pit, so you're the best one.
What's that?
You're not the one that got thrown in the Starlight pit, so you're the best one.
Well, Dickie Beer was the stuntman who did those stunts, who actually went into the Starlight pit. But both Dickie and I are very seriously want to honor and respect Jeremy Bulloch. So Dickie always signs Boba Fett stunts. And I signed Bespin Boba because that scene on Bespin is me. So, I don't pass myself off as Boba Fett. When fans ask,
what? Look, that's that scene though. The scene with Lando, and of course in the Carbonite. That's what sparked a lot of it for everyone, because I kept telling everybody that all he did was fall in the pit. I don't see where he was that great at, but the way you were talking about how you projected him, and I was watching like Jedi Joe. I started watching it again today, and I noticed that he had that gunslinger vibe to him. And then later they added the jingling of the spurs or whatever else, but you portrayed that really well.
Yeah, I tried, but it was Jeremy that gave me the direction the night before.
Yeah.
So it all goes back to Jeremy in my book.
I
did find out at a convention that I just did, and where was that? That was in Ocean City, Maryland. Somebody had done a lot of reading, and we got to talking about the body language of Boba Fett. And I do know Tim Morrison, and he's a really ace guy. But I was very disappointed in the body language that Tim was using, in the series. And I happened to have this conversation with this guy who was at the table, and he said, it's interesting you say that, because Tim said he was not happy about that either, but he was directed that way to be sort of, slump-shouldered and shuffling along and not, moving with, menace like Jeremy and I were doing. So that's really interesting. Because my feelings about the book of Boba Fett are positive, except the way Tamura was using his body, and I felt always that Fennec was actually more like Boba Fett, as I understand it. I mean, that was a really strong. I mean, she that's a strong performance. I don't want to get into the politics of this, but I think whatever the powers that be that were responsible for that series really undercut the legacy of Boba Fett and what Tim Morrison could have done with it. You hear where I'm going?
Yeah.
Yes, we all agree.
Very well, we are, because we talk about that on the daily around here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I have to admit, I mean, Fennec is a fascinating character, but it was the Book of Boba Fett, not the Book of Fennec.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what.
Admit, I was getting ready to ask him something along those lines, but I got the feeling he didn't want to talk about the politics behind it. So I'm glad you addressed that, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to. That would be shooting myself in the foot. But
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough. I'm sure the guys and can't thank you enough for Taco Cat, Eric, and everybody else that's been chiming in. I thank you so much for being a part of the Fraternal Order of the Force.
Yeah,
Dak, you can always pilot our ships no matter what, and we won't leave you behind. That's for sure. And I ain't gonna sit there and throw my saber and not
Hold
get
on.
you
Now,
up.
I have to say, for a record, though, I thought Luke was going back for Dak.
Me too.
I don't see Luke going back for a saber. Dak was his friend. He wasn't going to leave his friend behind until he had no choice to. But that's just me. I don't see Luke going for his saber versus going for a person.
But
that's wishful thinking, though. I'll just say that's just wishful thinking, because he didn't unstrap him. He specifically got his lightsaber.
But what's so cool is he got a chance to shoot back at him. Dak had a chance to shoot back at him. He was in the Boba Fett costume shooting at Luke when he was on Bespin. Revenge.
He left him there.
Well, guys, we are at that.
Dickie Beer, who did a lot of stunts and played several characters, on the skiff. In the fight scenes, Dickie's fighting himself because he was stunt double for Mark Hamill, and he was stunt double for Jeremy Bulloch. So depending on the shots we're talking about and the angles, the reverse shots, it's Dickie fighting Dickie.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've had an awesome night. I couldn't thank you enough, Dak, for being a part of The Empire Strikes Back. And if nobody has nothing else, I would say the Force was strong with us tonight.
Very good.
The dark side.
Thank you again, sir.
Okay, guys. It was an honor.
It was our honor.
We'll see you down at Tidewater, assuming I'm going to be there. I think I am.
Mike Federelli is a nice guy.